My name is Martin Robbins. I'm a senior fellow at the Allen M. Voorhees Transportation Center, which is at Rutgers University in the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. I want to make a personal comment first. I want to thank a couple of the earlier speakers for saying such nice things about me, Rich Keevy and Tony Kosha. That was very heartwarming. What I'd like to do is also note how wonderful it is to see such a large audience that responded to the call for this meeting. Because what this shows is that there really is a craving for a new transportation, an approach to transportation policy and financing in this country. As Jack Basso said earlier, SAFETEA-LU didn't really accomplish a heck of a lot except to give us some more money, and that was more or less 8 years of policy learning that had been lost. This is a very, very important time in the nation's history to deal with transportation policy, and hopefully we can apply ourselves in a way that will get us to a much better result. And seeing all these people in this room, instead of a lot of empty seats, seeing all these people who have responded to this is very hopeful that we can have the kind of dialogue that can lead to a better policy formulation, either be it in 2009 or 2010, whichever way it works out, because we truly are at a crossroads. As Rich Keevy just mentioned, our panel is down to 3 people, but it is an extraordinarily good panel nonetheless. Jeanette Sadik-Khan could not, who is the Commissioner of Transportation for the City of New York, could not join us. But the panel that we do have today is composed of 3 very, very capable experts. We have the transportation commissioners of the states of New Jersey and New York, Stephen Dilts and Astrid Glynn, and who both in their daily work are struggling to find ways and solutions to their transportation funding dilemmas. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing about that from both of them. Both of these states have historically relied on their transportation networks to provide them with comparative economic advantages. And in this time of incredible economic instability, widespread personal financial insecurity, which I'm sure many of you feel today, and depleting tax resources, the challenge of finding reasonable transportation financing solutions is more challenging than ever. The outcome of the Federal Surface Transportation Assistance Program is therefore of great interest to them as well as to you, because the federal program will have great bearing on their capability to keep their state's transportation financing on course. Our third panelist, Michael Replogle, the Transportation Director at the Environmental Defense Fund, will provide us with some fresh perspectives and proposed new directions which may gain currency in the fluid political era into which we are heading. These include universal mileage-based road user fees, time-of-day road and parking pricing, the infrastructure bank, which we've heard so much about, which is a very promising idea, and carbon taxes and trading, which we've also heard a fair amount about. Now, you have the impressive biographies of our speakers in your packets, so I will dispense with a lengthy recitation of their backgrounds. The order of our speakers will be that Commissioner Stephen Dilts will go first, because he has a command performance in a governor's emergency cabinet meeting, which I'm sure will not be the most pleasant experience in his career. That's coming up at noontime. Many of you New Jerseyans know what is coming up. Stephen has been the Commissioner of Transportation since December 2008 and has made a remarkably positive impression on the people in the transportation community. Prior to being appointed to that position by Governor Corzine, he apprenticed as the Deputy DOT Commissioner since 2006. So he came into the position really knowing what he needed to do, and he's showing that. And before that, he had a wonderful experience for a number of years as the Deputy Executive Director of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. Very interesting to me is that Steve got his baptism in public service as the mayor of Little Hampton Borough out in Hunterdon County, and that serves him in very good stead when he meets with groups from Western New Jersey, let me tell you. Steve, as I mentioned, Steve will have to leave by at least noontime to participate in this governor's emergency cabinet meeting. Our second speaker is another person that I've gotten to know over the past several years, and that has been a very, very distinct privilege for me, and that is Astrid Glynn. She serves as the New York State Commissioner of Transportation, and she's been in that she's been in that position for an eventful almost 2 years now. Formerly, she came to the position from the Deputy Chief of the Massachusetts Office of Commonwealth Development, and before that, earned her transportation spurs in a decade at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Transportation. She is a very active member of AASHTO, working with people like Jack Basso, and one of her duties there is she's the chair of the Intercity Passenger Rail Leadership Group, which President Obama has made sure is going to be a very active group over the next several years, to his credit. She has brought a high degree of professionalism to her position, and as her bio attests, and I want to say personally that I've observed the way in which she has restored a public credibility to one of the great mega projects of our region, the replacement of the Tappan Zee Bridge a most difficult project, and she is grappling with the financing of that project right now. And but in the hands of someone of Astrid Glynn's capabilities, those who are concerned about that subject are sure that something very positive will come from that effort. Let me finally say about Michael. He has some very, very significant thoughts about transportation. He is one of the really deep thinkers in the transportation field. In addition to his role at the Environmental Defense Fund, he is the director the president and the founder of the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, which is a nonprofit group that has promoted bus rapid transit, non-motorized transportation. Some of you have expressed interest about that subject, and urban revitalization. So with this wonderful panel, I'm going to turn it over, and each of them will step forward. First, Commissioner Stephen Dilts. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It is an honor to be here, Richard, and to Mort, who gives the keynote address at lunchtime, and I know Tony Kosha was here and opened this morning. My esteemed panelists, Astrid and Michael, it is great to be in your company, and I'm only sorry and regretful because I've been looking forward to this day for the past at least 6 to 8 weeks since Richard first talked to me about it, that I'm only going to be able to be with you for this hour and in a shortened, abbreviated session because there is so much good conversation, there is so much good information being shared today that I will ask some of the friends that are in the room to please communicate that back to me on what was addressed and some of the things that we might be able to break through in a forum like this, because this is exactly what we should be doing. I am honored and flattered as somebody with a University of Pennsylvania degree to be allowed on campus and not marked for injury. And this may be, that's right, I haven't left yet. And as long as I do my best here, I think I'll be safe. But it's nice to be here in such a presence. New Jersey. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. New Jersey has a world-class transportation system. It is a mature, largely completed, interstate system. We are the home of the only statewide mass transit system in New Jersey Transit. We have among the best, most successful, most comprehensive toll road systems in the nation. We have a tremendous economy that's created by two of our greatest cities in our country, in New York City and in Philadelphia. And the surrounding areas have benefited from so much that Ben Franklin, I'm going to quote a Penn guy here, the founder of Penn. How could I here at Princeton? I know. When he said New Jersey was a keg tapped at both ends. We have a transportation system that largely looks like that. We certainly feed into the urban environment that surrounds our state. But our state itself benefits from where we are. And make no mistake, New Jersey offers so much on our side of the rivers that is our own. But it is certainly such an honor to have the trust of Governor Corzine to manage such a system. The past few years, we have done what we could to manage this system better. We have built what I consider a world-class transportation management center in Woodbridge. We have done that working between agencies. We have multiple agencies under one roof, monitoring our traffic, communicating with our drivers, and letting them know of problems as they develop, giving them alternatives, and working with the media to distribute that information. In effect, managing the system that we have better. New Jersey Transit has a similar rail operations center in Kearney, and even better, sometimes the two centers communicate. And we have our rail passengers and auto passengers working and understanding a morning or an evening's events better. And that's exactly what we would expect. Under Governor Corzine, we have invested heavily in our infrastructure. We have more than doubled, almost doubled, the funding of our bridges. We now spend more than $600 million maintaining our state's bridges and rehabilitating our state's bridges. We have increased our spending on infrastructure, such as pavement around the state. We are spending all in about $1.6 billion through our trust fund on our priorities. That is matched by $1.7 billion in federal monies. This puts tens of thousands of people to work every single month and improves the system that I just described. In November, Governor Corzine announced that between then and the end of this calendar year, we would spend approximately $2.8 billion between Transit, Turnpike, Parkway, DOT, and the South Jersey Transportation Authority on transportation spending. $2.8 billion is more than we ever have spent in any given year. This is before stimulus. And in effect, stimulus is hand in hand with what we are trying to do in New Jersey at this critical juncture. We are trying to put people to work, to support and create new jobs. And transportation is a part of our economy that largely is driven by consensus. I think people in this room understand what I'm speaking of. I'm blessed with consensus largely when I go into different rooms that people want a good transportation system that works. So many of my peers and colleagues in the cabinet have to grapple with issues that are much more divisive in certain circles. Transportation brings us together, quite literally, and delivers us to where we need to be. So this is one of those areas that we have agreement. I think in the stimulus package out of Washington, you saw that consensus. If anything, there was a lasting wish that more could be put into transportation. But still, the dollars that we're going to get are on top of the $2.8 billion that New Jersey intends to spend in the coming year. I will say that not all is perfect, and I don't think I am breaking any news by saying that. We have long-term underinvestment in our infrastructure around New Jersey. Today, we have approximately 312 structurally deficient bridges on our system. We have a backlog of $13.6 billion or so in bridge needs. More than half of our pavement on our interstates and highways is considered to be at unacceptable levels. Our congestion alone in New Jersey costs the average driver about 52 hours a year. Translated to an economic cost, that's about $8.6 billion in lost productivity. It affects our productivity as a state, and it affects our quality of life. And the mass transit system that I noted makes other states jealous is approaching capacity, and in many places in our small state is still unreachable by mass transit. Governor Corzine has challenged us to look at how to best manage a unified transportation system. He's challenged us to look at funding across modes, basically between transit, turnpike, DOT. We have multiple modes across our state. Multiple funding formulas need to be developed. And better yet, the agencies need to speak with one voice wherever possible. In response to that challenge, we have developed a capital investment strategy that brings managers of all those modes, highways, rails, bicycles, ports, airports, pedestrian safety, together to discuss funding needs and how to best determine where to spend that next dollar. This process has been useful on a number of levels, both formally and informally. From a formal basis, obviously we have a structure in place now that better measures where we're spending our money, where our needs are, and where we need to go when we have any infusion of dollars. It is very helpful right now as we get an unexpected windfall through stimulus. I will tell you on the informal level, it is extraordinarily powerful to have people under one roof, to have people in one room that used to rarely communicate, maybe pick up the phone, maybe send an email, maybe get a letter in a formal sense, to now work together to develop budgeting, to develop a balanced and unified approach. The challenge itself has brought those types of energies together. And I saw in our recent snowstorm just how powerful that benefit can be as more and more we are working across a unified system. The public doesn't care who owns the system that they're on, who manages the system that they're on. They just care that they get to their destination safely and in a timely fashion. And we have achieved that to a large extent in New Jersey over a lot of years of work here, putting this all together. And I'm very proud of that. It has an operational impact, and it certainly has a funding impact as well. The best example, perhaps, of working together and bringing funding together is our mass transit tunnel project, also known as the ARC Tunnel project. We have one rail tunnel going in New York City. Next year, 2010, it celebrates its 100th birthday. And it has served our region incredibly well, because if you think about what rail travel was like 100 years ago, it wasn't anywhere near what it is today. And there's no way that those that built that tunnel, those that built Penn Station, which was built at the same time, could have contemplated that rail travel wouldn't have been the luxury or the vacation getaway or the trip to the Hamptons in a whole different culture and what it translated over time into. Every day, that Penn Station is loaded up to the gills, quite literally, overloaded with traffic and people. And that rail tunnel is a choke point, literally, into New York City. And that backs up into our state of New Jersey, slows down our traffic. It allows us not to offer express service and more enhanced service throughout the state. As I said, many places in our state can't reach mass transit. And that is a problem, and that is a problem that we need to fix. But we can't do it with the system that's in place. It begins with the mass transit tunnel. That will allow us to expand services to the west. It will allow us to expand services to the south. It is very critical, and without it, there is no need to have that type of debate where mass transit will be offered, at least from a rail capacity standpoint, because it just can't be offered. So something like that with such high priority deserves and merits the attention of a governor. He has given it that type of attention. It deserves and merits the attention of all of us in trying to build a better future for New Jersey, because our future absolutely does depend on it. So, all hands on deck. We have come up with a funding formula that shares resources and takes advantage of those resources that I've mentioned around the state. The Turnpike Authority will have a vested financial interest in the mass transit tunnel, which is an extraordinary thing to say. As a former deputy executive director there, the Turnpike runs roads, and it manages people and cars. What in the world are they doing with a mass transit tunnel? Well, it recognizes that the future of the Turnpike is hand in hand with the future of mass transit. Our system, our toll system, would be overwhelmed without a mass transit tunnel. We have to preserve capacity so that trucks, so that commerce can continue to take roads like the Turnpike. And the tunnel will allow us to do just that. There is a feeder road concept established in law, and there is a feeder road and feeder rail element here that we are talking about. To make the system work, to make the entire transportation system work, it will require the cooperation and coordination of all modes. So yes, the Turnpike Authority is contributing. We have DOT funds. We have some federal funds going into a pot all in right now. We have $5.7 billion on hand to build that second rail tunnel into New York City. We remain $3 billion short. And we are working with the Federal Transit Administration. We have just filed our early systems work agreement. The stimulus package did provide some New Starts funding, which was critical to allowing projects like the Mass Transit Tunnel to take that next necessary step, which is to establish a formal and ongoing financial relationship with the federal government that says, yes, this is a project with merit. It is a project that will create 6,000 jobs every single year, construction jobs. When it's done, it will create 44,000 permanent jobs. It will double our rail capacity into New York City. We can move 48 trains into New York City rather than the current 23. And the benefits don't go only to New York City, they extend back to New Jersey and allows our system to function as it should. This long-term partnership, this long-term funding formula, I think is not only novel, it is the way of the future and the way that New Jersey will continue to invest in projects and in infrastructure through a shared and cooperative and unified basis. Moving forward, the governor has laid out a vision for 2020 and ultimately 2050 that targets a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. Well, that type of system would require more mass transit, more carpooling, an alternate fuel development, and alternate fuel vehicles. We will require better planning for transit-oriented development, more walkable and livable communities. We will be required to find new methods to get people out of their cars and into other modes of travel. Just based on that vision alone and based on where we want to go to the future generations, we need a system that can accommodate that. So the two are tied hand in hand. I am very, very lucky as commissioner now to have the benefit of a history of a trust fund that goes back to 1984 in New Jersey, a trust fund that has been solid throughout that tenure, and a trust fund that is critical to our success. Other states, Astrid and I were at the White House, the old executive office building, a few weeks back with Secretary LaHood. And at that time, a very critical part of the conversation about stimulus developed, and that was what's called maintenance of effort. Is every state moving forward going to be able to maintain the effort that they are spending? Are they going to be able to spend the monies they spend now moving forward? And in fact, a lot of commissioners, Astrid, raised their hands and said, we haven't been able to continue our transportation funding at a regular level since October 1st. When the economy took a downturn, so did our transportation spending. We had to move those dollars into other areas to balance the budget. I felt, maybe, Astrid, that I was one of the few people that didn't have their hands raised. That it was one of the few commissioners that could say New Jersey continues to spend not only as planned, but accelerating work and doing more than we think we could have done sitting here this time last year in spending in transportation. And that goes to the very spirit and essence of stimulus itself. Don't cut back things like transportation and infrastructure investment when we need that spending even more. So in that case, we are very lucky. We are lucky because we have a trust fund that is in place that can allow us to maintain our level of commitment and maintain our level of spending. We are certainly watching what happens on the federal level this year particularly as the trust fund for the federal government expires in September, end of September of 2009. Their reauthorization, the law's reauthorization, will certainly be key to how we move forward. They are going to be debating critical issues, whether they are going to move on a gas tax, looking at VMT, which the administration I know has ruled out. Members of Congress had said not so fast. That will be a very interesting conversation indeed, especially with the VMT and some of the infrastructure that needs to be in place. If the federal government moves in that area and certainly develops more resources in that area, all states, I'm sure, will be looking at other options and other opportunities. But it really has to start there on the federal level, and it starts this year. And it is very, very critical that a thoughtful debate happens. And Astrid and I and others are going to be paying attention, as will you, and participating in that debate, no doubt, because it will absolutely shape the future of transportation spending in the states and how the states approach a transportation system, whether in New Jersey or elsewhere. I would be remiss if I didn't end my remarks by talking about stimulus. Certainly, the model of financing there, which is using the infrastructure and the rules and the processes in place right now. Don't create anything new. Don't cut any corners, but don't create anything new. And we can spend our dollars faster than if they contemplated a whole new layer of government or a whole new approach to government that we had to build and then spend money. That's what Congress decided to do. They kept a lot in place, and they infused our systems with resources that we now need to spend and spend quickly. We have 120 days to obligate half of our stimulus funds. We will obligate 100% in New Jersey of our stimulus funds and move forward quickly. What will we get? We will get $469 million for our highways. We will get $425 million for transit. And the counties and local governments will get approximately $162 million, and that is being managed through the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, the MPO process. All of those energies, and I see Freeholder Palmer here from the NJTPA, all of those energies that are at work now. We rolled out our list yesterday. We briefed members of Congress, the Senate, and our local legislators on what our list looked like. It is now available on the web. Where we are going to be spending our money on the highways, where we will be spending on our money on the transit system, and the type of investment decisions that we're making there. And in the weeks to come, the MPOs will have completed its process to allow that money to start flowing. We need money in the field. We need to create construction jobs. We need to create the indirect jobs that are supported by construction now and fast. That is the charge that Governor Corzine offers us in the state of New Jersey, and that's a charge that we all share. And it's a charge that we can all rally around, because, as I said, transportation is one of those great areas that does have consensus. We cannot lose that consensus. The conversation has to be civil. The conversation has to be honest. And we cannot lose the opportunities that we have before us to show the public that their trust is well-founded in a time in which trust is given very, very carefully. It needs to be earned particularly. And I am committed to overseeing these funds and working with Governor Corzine to show the public that a dollar invested in transportation does make a difference. It's an impact that will have future benefits, and we will spend it wisely. And I know that you share that type of common purpose and common energy. I certainly welcome the opportunity to address you with some remarks. I acknowledge, Richard and Martin, that they are a little more descriptive rather than prescriptive. I will allow smarter people than I, like Michael, perhaps to offer more of the prescriptive side. But I thought today that you should hear from me in the very time, in the very circumstances that I face and that we face as a state. And I hope that I've contributed something to what is an outstanding forum. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
One of the nice things about being in public service is the fact that you do get a chance to learn. And having the opportunity to come here today is a very welcome part of that learning experience. And I've been delighted by what I've heard so far. And I hope that I can help keep it a positive learning experience for all of us. One of the things, though, that none of us need to learn is the fact that these are, to put it politely, very challenging economic times. We've, in the last year, seen fuel prices skyrocket and then fall to some of the lowest levels in years. We've seen the financial markets go from crisis to non-existence. And we've seen state budgets soar and collapse. We've seen vehicle miles traveled decline, demonstrating that our current federal funding system and, for large part, state funding systems are not sustainable in the long run. Indeed, the ability of government to meet the needs of our citizens has never been more important and never been more severely challenged. As you've already heard, our infrastructure needs are immense and growing. We've had study after study, commission after commission that tells us that. We've had 2 national commissions that have told us that we basically need to double our investment in transportation in this country. Joel will tell you that in the New York metropolitan area, known resources are about $5 billion over the next 20 years, and identified needs are closer to $50 billion. Last year, New York State did a study that looked at what our long-range needs were for the system exclusive of MTA and exclusive of the Port Authority. We saw $175 billion coming at us in terms of needs, and only about half that in sight in terms of resources. So the issue is plain. It is not a secret. It is not a revelation. We also know our existing resources are not sustainable even at the level that they have been providing. As you've heard, the Federal Highway Trust Fund required an $8 billion infusion last September. When that infusion happened, it was expected to get us to this September. I don't know that many people think it will anymore. At the state level, we in New York have a dedicated fund. We're very proud of it also, but we take a little less comfort from it now because for the last couple of years it has required also infusions from the general fund, something that's getting increasingly hard to get. And to make it worse, about 50% of the revenues in the dedicated fund go to pay the interest to service bonds issued in past years. And in the next few years, if nothing changes, it's probably going to be 80% of the dedicated fund revenues that goes to pay past bonds. So we have no shortage of funding challenges coming at us. We are very thankful that Congress recognized the importance of transportation and its utility in stimulating the economy and gave us what amounted to an extra year's worth of federal funding. We will put that money to good use within 120 days, and thereafter we will put people to work starting this spring, and we will keep them at work as long as that money lasts. But resources are only part of the issue, and that stimulus funding, wonderful as it is really just like a roller coaster high, and we have a roller coaster low coming at us. There's no doubt that there's no easy place to look for the money. You saw from Jack's slide the menu of places we can look. There's no silver bullet. We need to look in all those places. We need to look at vehicle mile travel calculations. We need to look at why the gas tax has stayed stagnant all these years. We need to look at public-private partnerships. We need to look at value capture alternatives. We need to look at tax credit bonds. There is no single remedy that we can all say, eureka, that is it. So as we look for how we persuade the public to give us access to all those remedies, we really need to look at why we have not succeeded in getting that support so far. And I would say that to date we have made very plain the case that we need the funds, but we have not made very plain the case why we are a good investment of those funds. I hope the stimulus bill is an opportunity for us to start remaking that case, because we need to persuade the American public that we are worth spending money on, that just as they have spent more money on everything else since 1993, the last time the gas tax was increased, they need to start spending more money on the transportation system. And I'd suggest that as we do this, we need to remember that transportation does not exist for its own purposes. It exists to support daily activities. It moves people and goods from where they are to where they want and need to be. Transportation infrastructure is the foundation of our society and our economy. It's one of those systems that we all use and we don't notice until it goes wrong. Yet most people, as they take that system for granted, are trying hard not to remember the things that we and the transportation professionals are constantly thinking of. The bridge that might collapse or at least be closed. The snowstorm where the plows don't quite make it out. Or an accident, bad weather, grounding planes, the things that keep Stephen and myself a little, at least myself, a little grayer. Because when society can't move, our economy stops, quite literally. And in the broader sense, transportation does more. As you heard this morning, climate change is a growing concern and consideration for everybody in the transportation field. Unfortunately, we contribute 1/3 of the nation's greenhouse gases. We have not been able to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals as a nation unless and until we consider transportation's role in that mix. And as climate change legislation is being considered by Congress, transportation should be part of the discussion. Climate change funds, I hope, can be available not only to incent a new type of transportation system, but also as criteria for distributing the transportation funds that we have traditionally had. We should be rewarding states with low carbon footprints per capita, not simply incenting states to sell more gasoline and contribute more to the Highway Trust Fund. So transportation can influence the way we live in many ways. Easy access to an uncongested and well-maintained highway and roadway system has indeed led to sprawl over the last several decades, but it can also lead with other decisions to more compact and efficient forms of growth. We talk a lot about smart growth, and we talk about the need to provide access to transit and better linkages. We also need, however, to talk about the fact that transit is not a self-sustaining system. Transit is inherently more expensive to the public purse than the highway system. That means that we are going to need to revisit the issue of operating subsidies. The federal government long ago got out of the business of providing operating subsidies for transit. If we are going to talk about more transit, particularly transit in areas that have not traditionally supported it because they do not have the density, we're going to need to find some way to deal with the fact that that is going to be a more expensive proposition for some level of government, for some group of taxpayers, than just another highway lane would be. So how do we get past that history? How do we finally break down the modal silos? We know we want to do it. We know we need to do it. We've long ago recognized the fact that there is not going to be, just as there is no one silver funding bullet, there is no one silver modal bullet. For instance, last summer we took a look at the trip times in the Northeast Corridor because, frankly, of some of the attention that the Port Authority had brought to the subject of congestion at the LaGuardia and JFK airports. We found that a lot of those slots that were being so fought over at those airports, that were being rationed like endangered species, were in fact going to cities, to trips generated from the Northeast Corridor. If we had a strong Northeast Corridor and feeder system, including upstate system going into that metropolitan area, think how much gate capacity we could free up at those airports. Gate capacity that could be used for other types of trips that would contribute to growth in the New York metropolitan area, and at the same time provide mobility for the people on the Northeast Corridor. That travel market is competitive. It should be integrated. And I hope that with the new administration, and Mort, if there is one phrase that I hope comes back with this new administration, the phrase one U.S. DOT, it really should be it, because that is the type of integration that we need if we're going to make this system work. There's also the potential of having our customers do some of our work for us. Frankly, if we give people information, they will tend to make rational choices. But what we have not done so far very well is give people equal information, convenient, reliable, accurate information about all modes of transit and highway use, all modes of transportation, at the same time and in the same place. This is the sort of thing that Google or FedEx would do automatically, but as DOTs, we have struggled long and hard with. I'm very glad that I can say that we have started to provide that service. With 511, the Traveler Information System, we have now, at least for the New York metropolitan area, a multimodal information system. And by next summer, it will be a statewide multimodal transportation system, so that anywhere in New York State, you can go one place and find out how to go where you want to go by any mode that the public supports. That will include private carriers, public transit, it will include highways, it will even, in some cases, go down to small local bus operators of the slightly larger than jitney size. That type of information is the start of integrating our transportation system and breaking down the silos. But beyond that, we need to look at how we are going to really redefine our goals. Because asking for money is not going to be an easy way to succeed in the next few years. We need to find new ways to support our requests, and we need to find new places to look for that money. I'm very proud of the fact that in New York, the Ravitch Commission started a discussion that includes a wide range of funding alternatives for the New York transit system. It's that combination of approaches that will be important to finding acceptable solutions where the public will be willing to bear a fair share. And fair is such an important word in this debate. A fair share of the cost that we are asking them to assume. We've also started working with the State Asset Maximization Commission, trying to see if there aren't better ways for us to work with the private sector. It could be something as simple as real estate sales, signage, privatization of rest areas. It could be something as complicated as the Tappan Zee Bridge financing. We also, I hope, are going to be able to talk about what climate change might mean. Because I would suggest that climate change is really an opportunity not only for us to reshape how we prioritize transportation funding, but also how we look at what climate change revenues, be they produced by a cap-and-trade regime, such as RGGI, or a carbon tax, what they might do to really change the transportation system. We are not suggesting that these funds be used to build a bigger system of the type that we have, but we are suggesting that they could help us build a cleaner and more energy-efficient system. We want to use the proceeds of whatever climate change policy changes to invest in choices such as intercity passenger rail, which, for all the fact that it's feeling a little bit like the dog that caught the car with the $8 billion right now from the stimulus package, still has no reliable and regular source of funding at the federal level. It is a mode with tremendous potential and should have that support comparable to the support enjoyed by other modes. Transit, as I mentioned, if we're going to do smart growth, we have to do more transit. If we're going to reduce VMTs, we have to do more transit. And transit right now has too much of a structural deficit that we are simply pushing from level of government to level of government. We need to address that. More energy-efficient equipment. This could be something as simple as LED traffic signals. It could be retrofitted construction equipment. It could simply be weather-tight snowplow garages. We can be better at what we do with our housekeeping. And, of course, ITS. And this includes not only the multimodal trip planning that I mentioned, and congestion alerts, synchronized traffic controls, and yes, maybe even someday VMT counting systems. that do not compromise privacy. Some of this may mean greater throughput, i.e. greater mobility, on the current highway footprint. A lot of it will generate even further needs, the operating subsidies I mentioned, as well as the rail system that is been so long neglected. But the result will be a transportation system that will begin to evolve from problem to solution, and that will have a vested interest in continued reductions in greenhouse gases. So we are starting to develop a different vision for the future, but I think there are a couple of other changes that we as transportation professionals need to make if we are going to succeed in persuading the American public to invest in us. One is the fact that we need to stop taking so long to do what we do. We shouldn't be surprised that if we take 12 years, 3 to 6 electoral cycles, to move a substantial project from concept to construction, elected officials are less than excited about our plans. And that if we take months more than we expected to complete a project that we promised, why are we surprised that the traveling public gets a little cranky when they have to go through our construction site day after day? And if our project budgets routinely balloon by 20% to 50%, why should we assume that our pleas for more resources will be credible? So I would suggest that we need to learn as transportation providers to commit to fast action and clear answers. If a project isn't moving, let's say so. Let's explain why it's backburnered and either get the support to get it moving or leave it backburnered. If we don't believe our own cost estimates, let's say they are simply order of magnitude figures. And once the project is ready, let's fight to keep scope creep and change orders from taking over. The public budget is not unlimited, and no project budget should be unlimited either. We also need to start judging ourselves by how much good we do for the larger whole: housing, employment, the environment, not just how much we make the transportation system better. This means that we need to integrate our goals with the goals of others, and that we can't be afraid of metrics that depend on others. Transportation cannot truly succeed by itself. Transportation success is not a bridge with a high structural rating or well-synchronized traffic signals or even a brand new bus. Transportation success is in the truck that goes over the bridge to deliver goods to a warehouse. It's the commuter who doesn't get more and more impatient with each stop-and-go level of service F. And it's the night nurse who can get to the midnight shift at the hospital because that bus is not only new, it's also on her street and it's on time. So I'm going to suggest that we refocus our definitions of success and we find places, maybe just special target zones at first, some of which may be metropolitan areas, where we can look for multidisciplinary opportunities. As Rob mentioned before, and as Michael and I had occasion to work on at a forum a few months ago, there are tremendous opportunities in metropolitan areas. They are places where the game really can change. But I don't want you to forget the rural areas, because in the rural areas, transportation is no less important. That's the place where mobility is the closest challenge to employment, simply because there are so few choices. It's a place where elders can be forced from their homes because they have to give up their driver's license. And it's a place where good freight logistics can mean the difference between a factory staying open or closing. Finally, I'd like to suggest that we need to invest more in technology as problem solvers. And this does not simply mean having a good widget. It means having a good widget that will solve the problem we need to address. For instance, we will not solve the VMT pricing problem unless we solve the privacy problem. In many parts of this country, including the Northeast, we're looking for high-speed rail, we're looking for energy-efficient high-speed rail, and yet that right now depends on catenary systems. That is not the wave of the future in a built-up area with constrained corridors such as we have here. And while the federal government has been working so hard to reinvent the finances of the American auto industry, if there is one left, I hope that we can also help invent the product of that industry. So I don't know if these approaches, more attention to what communities want, looking for solutions across silos, delivering what we promise, and focusing on the broader societal goals will earn us that money that we so desperately need. But I hope it will, because we do need it. Thank you very much.
I'm going to make a mid-course correction here. What I'd like to do is, since Commissioner Dilts is about to leave in about 3 or 4 minutes, I want to invite maybe 1 or 2 questions for Commissioner Dilts. I know that you as a New Jersey audience would love to get a question or 2 directed at him. So,
Yes, sir.
anybody? We have someone, Larry.
What are your thoughts about the reauthorization of the Transportation Trust Fund, and what are some of the options out there on the table?
Larry, why don't we talk offline? Larry's a reporter for the Asbury Park Press, so why don't we
That wasn't on a plan.
Right, why don't we talk a little offline, Larry? Thank you. Michael.
Chip Kreider, Princeton graduate alum, local resident, local businessman. About 2 years ago, before your tenure, I guess, the DOT and NJ Transit ordered a report on viability of personal rapid transit in New Jersey. It was prepared by the Voorhees people, and I must say it was a very positive report, and it was a very well-done report. And in the report, they listed a series of 4 recommendations to move forward on this after enumeration why it would be good for New Jersey. And those recommendations varied from further study to actually building a pilot installation. So I'm wondering what, if anything, has been done in DOT in those 2 years toward moving this forward. And I might also point out, in those 2 years, we've seen unprecedented changes in society, starting first with the spike in energy prices. And of course, the 2 strongest arguments for personal rapid transit are energy efficiency and sustainability. And I think that's an issue we're going to have to address sooner rather than later.
Commissioner needs the time. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and Martin may be in a better place to answer the question. I probably will exceed my time that I have here to answer it. I will say that obviously the issues that are presented within the report, within your comments, are critical. I've mentioned them myself in getting to a better place as a society. Astrid said it perfectly. In serving the larger goals of our society, the larger ends of our society, that's what we do. And we have to think outside the box in order to achieve that. So I can't give you specifics here, sir, today on what we've done over the past couple of years. Martin may be able to in my absence, but I certainly understand the spirit of the question. And I'd like to certainly, I'll be following up with Martin more on that point in the next couple of weeks when we're back together.
All right, well, if we can have one more question, and then we'll release you. Yes.
Hi.
It's over here? Yeah.
Eric Johansson from the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia and fellow Penn alum.
All right.
New Jersey Transit's kind of unique statewide structure gives it an ability to look at intercity rail as well as regional rail. And I'm wondering if you've worked with Amtrak into thinking about how you can complement their service, particularly within the corridor between Philadelphia and New York.
We talk to Amtrak every day, and it certainly is an important partnership in complementing their service. I think we do a pretty good job at doing that right now. Obviously, the Northeast Corridor is one of our critical routes. They own it. We operate on it. So as you can imagine, that makes for an interesting partnership and an interesting dynamic. But making sure that certainly our regional rail services promotes and provides service and customer base for Amtrak is critical. So I would say that, yes, I totally agree with the concept and structure of your question, and we communicate every day trying to figure out different ways to support that larger end. And as we get more monies for high-speed rail, and I work with Astrid and other leaders in our Northeast region on our own thoughts for high-speed rail, we'll be doing more of that. Getting customers to feed into that larger system is key. Michael Eggington, my friend, go ahead.
Commissioner, just real quick, on top of that, just because I'm a South Jersey resident, keep in mind, and as you do, you travel around the state, and the business community stands supportive of the ARC transit tunnel. In the South, there's the need for an east-west corridor, the possibility of looking at the Monmouth-Mercer, the MOM line, the possibility, feasibility of the old West Trenton line to see if that's possible. And, of course, the PACO high-speed line. I know DRPA and John Matheson has a lot of work going on there. So anything that you can support the infrastructure in the South would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
The ARC tunnel, mass transit tunnel, will expand services ultimately to 16 different counties, but that still needs 5 more, right? So to your point exactly, we have to look at the West Trenton line in a deliberative way. We've started to identify funds for a PACO expansion and extension of that service to complement what we're building in South Jersey. The River Line plays an important service down south, but obviously there's growing demand and needs to make sure that the rest of the state is filled in. So to your point exactly, I agree with that. Yes. Martin, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry that I had to
Good luck. Okay. Michael?
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to share this panel with Commissioners Glynn and Dilts and all of our other speakers. And I'm following a lot of other folks who've made, I think, very effective comments about the situation that we're in and the many ways in which there is indeed a broad emerging consensus about the need for a paradigm shift in transportation and how we manage it, how we think about it, how we provide it, how we finance it. I want to focus a little bit in my remarks about how we can align transportation financing and pricing with system management goals. Our current system is both broke and broken. Our dependence on the gas tax is failing as a model as we look forward into the future with hopefully increasingly efficient vehicles, and with the current decline in vehicle miles traveled per capita, which is actually a trend that started to emerge even before fuel prices began to run up. We're looking at demographic changes in our society and changes in our residential investment and housing patterns that are, I think, will continue to unfold in a profound way in the wake of this unfolding economic crisis that we're in. That means we won't be doing things the way we've been doing them for the last decades. And nonetheless, that leaves us with some really severe problems of figuring out how we pay for pressing needs to invest more in transportation, to modernize our transportation systems, and to develop truly customer-focused transportation services that help us to improve mobility while reducing its environmental footprint. There are a lot of different menu options on the table that have been talked about through 2 different transportation commissions to Congress recently. A host of these, and I'll touch on some of these in my remarks. But I think fundamental to this question of how we raise money is the question of what we want to spend the money for. And as Rob Puentes noted in his closing remarks, I think it's vital if we're going to secure the public's trust and confidence in supporting new revenues for transportation and supporting a repricing of mobility. The public has to have confidence that the funds that are raised, that they're being asked to contribute, will actually go to get better services and better performance from the system. And we now have at our hand, within our toolbox, tools like intelligent transportation systems, pricing strategies, smart traffic management, smart transit management, which can enable us to get a lot more productivity out of the existing system. We can't, as many people have said over the last couple of decades, we can't build our way out of congestion problems. We're now finally reaching a point where I think there's now a societal buy-in that we're not going to keep funding the transportation system to try to build its way out of congestion, which is what unfortunately has been happening in some of our states, not all. But if we apply these new tools, we can, in fact, deliver better mobility and reduce the environmental footprint of our transportation and move away from the failed paradigm that we've been in. How we price and manage and allocate street space and transport services is absolutely essential in communicating to the customer, to the shipper, how to use the transportation system, how to travel, how to move goods. And our behavior as consumers is very much affected by not only how much we pay, but how often we pay and how we pay for a variety of different things. And in fact, right now we have in our current pricing structures a lot of hidden incentives for people to drive. The so-called free parking that actually costs us more than $500 billion a year, which exacerbates our dependence on the car, exacerbates sprawl. The way that we price car insurance, which makes it essentially a fixed price good rather than a variable price good. The fact that we generally, except in this region, don't pay to use roads and bridges. But yet when we go on public transportation, we have to drop money into the fare box. Now, one of the options that's coming into increased use is public-private partnerships, and certainly, as we heard earlier speakers say, there's a great deal of private capital available, even in today's constrained credit markets, that is available for investment in developing better infrastructure and services in transportation. And we have a number of examples of these recent investments on both the highway side and the public transport side, including the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail here in New Jersey. These are things that are possible but are constrained right now by many of the legal frameworks around our transportation system. They are also frameworks for investment that will be enabled by other changes in how we pay for transportation. To the degree that we're able to focus on things like obtaining better value capture around transit stations, we can leverage more private capital into transit investment. To the degree that we can find ways to price existing roads to better manage and operate those for peak productivity and better service, we will find more opportunities for private investment to help manage those roads and to deliver more effective infrastructure. We've heard a lot of talk this morning about increased accountability in transportation, and this is also playing out through in public-private partnerships and looking for better accountability structures in the contracting process. There are a whole spectrum of different ways of doing public-private partnerships, from basic service contracts all the way through to privatization. Most public-private partnerships lie somewhere in the middle of that and involve some kind of a contract to manage an asset to deliver some kind of service quality with that asset. One of the more interesting examples is in London, or outside of in Yorkshire, England, where the road operator of a private road concession lease is compensated based not just on how much traffic is moved, but on how efficiently that traffic moves. So if the road gets congested at less than its rated capacity, the contractor's penalized and gets a reduced or no payment. But if they can manage that road to keep it free-flowing at or above the rated capacity, they can get a bonus. Now, we could use a similar kind of model with concessions for corridor transportation services to give incentives for the private sector to help the public sector operate and manage corridors or facilities or services so that they get more money if they can move more people while meeting a level of service standard for a lack of congestion, lack of delay, while reducing pollution or meeting other kinds of goals. We're seeing opportunities in things like parking, which is a terribly underutilized, underperforming asset in many of our towns and our cities. And more places like San Francisco and Chicago, Pittsburgh, are looking at how to extract value from these assets by working in public-private partnerships to better operate and manage surface parking or street parking or publicly owned parking garages, to deliver higher productivity, to price the parking, to keep turnover so that there are always some free parking spaces available for those people who are coming to shop. We're willing to pay a premium in order to have a parking space, and who by paying a premium can in fact help generate more revenue from these assets, and also open up new ways to, for example, price parking by the minute using new ITS technologies, rather than having people feed meters and then get a ticket if you overstay your meter by 5 minutes. You can find new approaches that are much more customer friendly so that the rate simply doubles or triples after you've been there 2 hours in a 2-hour zone, as long as you don't need to clear the street for transit. Now, there is also growing worldwide use of road tolls. We see this in Europe, in Asia, in this region as well. And this is an important way of helping us to manage traffic. Now, Singapore has taken this farther than any place in the world with a fully electronic road pricing system that's been in place now for 10 years, which uses the same kind of E-ZPass type technology, but with anonymous cash cards that fit into the devices that are fitted in each vehicle. And they now have over 70 charging points around their city arterial and motorway network, where the tolls get adjusted every 3 months in order to keep the traffic free-flowing at least 85% of the time. And this is a city that's used this kind of road pricing strategy to put money into the general fund and use that to fund a high-quality public transport system, both rail and bus. They've increased their transit mode share from 40% in 1975 when they started congestion pricing up to 67%. Even as they've increased their income per capita tenfold. And in achieving a high-performance transportation network, Singapore is now competing successfully in global labor markets for the best and the brightest minds in biotechnology and high technology, competing with us, as our cities don't work in many cases nearly as well as we see there. Now, why does this congestion pricing actually work effectively? This is actual data from a motorway outside of Washington, D.C., Interstate 66, but one can measure data like this anywhere in this region and around the world on motorways. And basically, when you run roads at peak efficiency at, say, about 6 a.m., you're running at 55 miles an hour and carrying about 8,000 vehicles in this 4 lanes of peak inbound traffic on Interstate 66 headed into Washington, D.C. That's at the peak efficiency point. And then a few hundred more cars try to squeeze through that point between just after 6 a.m., and it causes a backup to start. You go into that turbulent flow in engineering parlance, which is stop-and-go traffic that we all know. And by 7 a.m., you've lost half of the speed and a third of the throughput capacity. By 8 a.m., you're down to 15 miles an hour, and you've lost half of the effective productivity of the road at the very time you most want to travel on the road, that the most people want to travel. And what congestion pricing can do is by metering the amount of traffic that comes into the roadway, you can keep the road operating at a point where it stays in that high productivity curve. And that's exactly what Singapore does with its system. Now, we can see this visually, how this works on State Road 91 in Orange County, Riverside County, California, where there are 2 toll managed lanes in the center of this road and 4 unmanaged free lanes on the outside. And this is a really bad Friday afternoon where the toll, which is variable based on the traffic congestion demands, are adjusted. And it's up to $8.50 if you want to use the managed lanes, because you'll save at least 30 minutes using those managed lanes for your 10-mile drive on this section of road. There are actually, if you look at how many vehicles are moving, the 2 toll-managed lanes are carrying as much peak hour traffic as the 4 free congested lanes, and they're doing so at 3 times the speed. Now, what would happen if we applied toll congestion management to the 4 unmanaged lanes? It would be like unlocking 2 new lanes of virtual road capacity in the peak hours without laying down a single more inch of asphalt or concrete. And in fact, we'd be able to move more traffic, and the tolls could be much lower than $8.50 because we'd be accommodating more of the traffic demand in the peak hours. So the toll might drop down to $2, which could then actually generate more total toll revenue than we're now getting out of the 2 toll managed lanes in the center, which right now don't go to support transit. They just go back to the toll concessionaire to pay off the cost of building those toll managed lanes. But if we tolled all of the lanes on this road, we'd have money left over we could put into offering new express bus services and demand responsive van services in these corridors. And so these are the kinds of productivity achievements that we can unlock if we can find our way through the political challenges of implementing congestion pricing on existing road capacity to unlock its productivity for the user, for the customer, to deliver markedly better services. Now, Oregon has just finished a pilot project showing how you could do this, how you could introduce automated cashless tolls everywhere, mileage-based fees, on a transitional basis over a period of several years without having to go back and retrofit every car, and operated in parallel to substitute for the gas tax and eventually potentially replace the gas tax, where you'd have onboard GPS devices that would tally up how many miles you've driven in different zones, and then based on those mileage charges, when you go to a gas pump, you pay your mileage charge and have your gas tax deducted out. This is one model that's also extremely protective of privacy, as we heard Commissioner Glynn refer to. It's an important issue that we have to address. Now, what are the benefits of doing wide area congestion pricing? Well, we've seen from places like Stockholm, Sweden, and London, these are the kinds of results that are typically result, where the traffic is reduced within the charging zone by a quarter, which leads to 30 to 50% reductions in the amount of congestion delay, and typically a 15% or so reduction in emissions in the charging zone, and with benefits for the entire region in both reducing traffic and pollution. And these hold up over time. Now, tolling existing roads is like the third rail of transportation policy, but it has been shown to be effective and acceptable to the public in a number of places that have done it, where there's been political leadership to put it in place on a trial basis and to show that it works. If it boosts performance in a way that people can experience and feel and say, yes, that works for me, and if they also recognize that they get expanded travel choices at the same time produced by this. Stockholm went through this and actually did a 7-month trial of their thing, then took it out deliberately 6 months before a referendum in which people are asked, do they want to reinstate this congestion charge? And in fact, just as in London, 2/3 of the popular opinion was against doing the congestion charge on the day that it went into effect. But that opinion swung around very quickly after people saw and experienced the benefits, the reduced congestion delay, the increased dependability of the transportation system, the better transit choices that they got. And so now this congestion charge has been reinstated, actually by a new conservative government that didn't implement it, that opposed the congestion charge that had been put in by the Social Democrats and the Greens. But the new conservative governing party, after campaigning against the congestion charge, the first act that they took as a new coalition government in Stockholm was to reinstate it, because it raised so much money and it was so effective at reducing congestion, it had won public support. And so now there's 2/3 approval in public opinion polls for the congestion charge, which is back intact in Stockholm. So Germany has used these kinds of technologies now nationally, starting with heavy-duty commercial trucks. And they've got a lot of, they're sort of at the crossroads of Europe, lots of trucks coming from Eastern Europe to West and North to South. And so they've targeted the trucks first with GPS-based tolling devices, which has enabled them to toll 9,000 miles of roadway. And it's raised over $4 billion a year for investments in transportation and cut freight traffic, the number of empty trucks moving around the network, which has cut emissions as well. Now, we see another pathway, too, in the United States. We may well start road user charging with heavy commercial vehicles in some new pilot programs that are already being discussed by some states and at the federal level. There's also an advance coming in through use-based car insurance. And this can be done through simple odometer readings or with technologies. Progressive Insurance actually has a policy they've just rolled out here in New Jersey in recent months that offers consumers the ability to save money on their car insurance, 40 to 60%, by driving fewer miles and by driving less aggressively. Brookings just completed a study this summer showing that if all American drivers were offered pay-by-the-mile car insurance, it would cut vehicle miles traveled by about 8% and produce corresponding reductions in greenhouse emissions and fuel use. It would also save 2/3 of households money on their car insurance, with the average of those households saving about $270 per vehicle per year, which at a time when all of our pocketbooks are hurting is nothing to sneeze at, and certainly is a measure which helps align delivering better choices for people with an ability to control some of their transportation costs. And in Texas, we now see an insurance company called MileMeter, which has rolled out a pure mileage-based product, 100% of the cost based on how many miles you drive. You just tell them how many miles of insurance you want to buy in a particular 6-month period. And then if you start to run out of those miles, you can go back and buy more. So let's turn now to greenhouse gas cap and trade. And there are a lot of opportunities here as well for producing increased transportation funding and also for helping to reduce greenhouse emissions. Getting a carbon cap in place is, many people regard this as the essential next step in helping us to find least cost pollution reduction strategies for greenhouse gas emissions that meet science-derived targets that will help us protect the global climate from catastrophic change. But the price signal that comes from a cap and trade alone is likely not to get us all of the reductions that we need on greenhouse gas emissions. We need to also pay attention to what our transportation investment policies are and how they affect how many miles we drive, what kind of communities we develop. And there's a potential to take a portion of the allowance auction revenue from a cap and trade system and to invest that back into transportation, as Commissioner Glynn was speaking, into projects that will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to tie that also with requirements for greenhouse gas reduction planning at the state and metropolitan level. And in fact, legislation was just introduced yesterday or the day before yesterday in the House of Representatives, and we'll see a similar bill in the Senate shortly, called Clean Tea, which would do just this, setting aside 10% of the future auction allowance revenue for transportation investments and making sure that we develop the effective data and monitoring systems needed to make these work. These frameworks that help us to measure and monitor greenhouse gas emissions at a local level are also key to helping our transportation agencies identify effective emission offset strategies that there's a great deal of potential for. A lot of transit agencies have the potential to undertake greening initiatives. Tolling agencies have the potential, for example, by automating toll booths and replacing them with cashless toll collection, could do a lot to reduce stop and start and idle emissions that waste fuel and produce greenhouse emissions. So these are things that could be measured, monitored, and in fact captured and put into a greenhouse gas option allowance market and sold to as emission reduction credits under a cap and trade system. So getting the data to do this, and improving the institutional effectiveness and institutional capacity to measure these things will be key to helping to move forward. But we also need to make sure that the transportation funding that we have, both the existing funding and the new funding that comes in, helps to give incentives for state and local and regional agencies to innovate, to adopt best practices, to advance those through things like the congestion reduction pilot program that we saw under the previous administration, through incentive funds that go to regions that undertake exemplary efforts to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in the longer term, and also to provide incentive funds for states, metro areas, and local governments that undertake strategies that actually are measured to reduce greenhouse emissions. So we can reward performance by tying funding to changes in matching ratios, for example, waiving the federal match requirements for places that do the most to reduce greenhouse emissions, and in fact produce a new federal roadmap for a mileage-based fee system, which we could adopt in the next reauthorization and refine in the following reauthorization, so that over the next decade we can have in place a full framework for deployment of these mileage-based fee systems that can enable local congestion pricing, that also protects privacy, that also ensures that we're looking at how the funds get distributed to produce equity through things like mobility tax credits. So thank you very much.
But we have a few minutes for questions. That was some of the most thoughtful presentations that I've seen in the transportation field in a long time. And I hope that you, as Commissioner Glynn said, that you were educated by what you heard. All right, Rich?
Pat Ward, West Windsor Township. In your presentation, you were talking about tolling the roads and that you would reduce congestion. It's been my experience that once you make a road undesirable, you're just moving the congestion somewhere else. Could you comment on that?
Well, I think this is where you get a big advantage in looking at using VMT fees and road user charges for the entire road network rather than just for selected roads. If all you do is put a congestion charge on a single motorway, yes, you will shift some of the traffic to the arterial roads and you'll get some diversion of people to those arterials. If, on the other hand, you do what, for example, was done in the pilot project in Portland or in Seattle, where they were looking at pricing all of the roads differentially, so that there might be a higher charge for motorways than there is for arterial roads, but you'd have to pay something cents per mile based on congestion levels for use of any of these roads. Then you can manage the whole network for high performance, like Singapore is now doing.
All right, next question.
Hello, my name is David Kessler. I'm a semi-retired transportation planning consultant with experience at the MTA and also with a private transportation service provider, and also with a graduate degree from the Woodrow Wilson School and a graduate degree in transportation engineering from the Princeton School of Engineering. My question is two-part for Astrid. And you mentioned the Ravage Commission, and as far as what the news reports have suggested, the solutions or recommendations revolve around an employee payroll tax or employer payroll tax, either congestion pricing or tolling these bridges. Now, I'm wondering, at a time when the auto industry and many other industries are restructuring, probably a euphemism for cost givebacks, why no mention is made of the costs of the MTA service providers, the labor costs. According to what I believe, the average bus driver earns something on the order of $90,000 out of pocket. We have a question. Yeah. Well, the question is, why has there been no mention of this? And also, we have very successful private contract operations, such as Rockland County and Westchester County and throughout the country. Why is there not more suggestion of a private contractor service?
Well, the balance between public and private bus service is one that FTA has been adjusting over the years. sometimes with greater success, sometimes with less success. I think the Ravage Commission was really looking not so much at the totality of the charges that the MTA needed to deal with. The MTA had already gone through a very extensive series of audits, reviews, cost-cutting measures. There was general consensus that reform was going to be needed no matter what the Ravage Commission said. And that discussion has been continuing. But what the Ravage Commission was doing was saying there is a shortfall. You can play with the numbers a little bit at the edges, but sooner or later there is a shortfall. What is the fair, equitable, and viable way to cut up that shortfall? And I have to commend them for really looking, maybe not coming up with the perfect solution, but really looking at how that shortfall should be spread across a number of policies as well as a number of sectors of the economy.
My name is Ed Bolden. I'm with Wilbur Smith Associates, and my question is for Commissioner Glynn. You talked about various fundings in your discussion, but I wanted to know if the state was considering the tolling of additional facilities, and secondly, what techniques or approaches are you looking at to reinforce the New York State's trust fund?
Well, we had a conference last fall called Beyond the Gas Tax. And at that conference, we explored a number of alternatives, including tolling, including the traditional gas tax, including fee baits and green baits and so forth. What the conclusion was that there was no one remedy that we could say would be it, and that the shortfall was so significant, everything needed to stay in play. That, for instance, design build, which is one of the items that we as a state do not have the ability to do, although the City of New York does, the MTA does, the Port Authority does, we are legislatively precluded from doing that. And if we're going to have really be able to tap the whole world of public-private partnerships, or even public-public partnerships in some cases, we need to be able to take that first step. So one of the things we have been discussing most closely with the State Asset Maximization Commission is there a way for us to get the ability to design build? Because if we have that, then we can start to look at design build finance, design build, all sorts of considerations that might include new ways to toll new places.
Rena Bardo with PBS&J. Commissioner Glynn, I think you made an exceptional point that the public does not understand the value of investing in infrastructure. People think it's their God-given right to drive on a street and they don't have to pay for it, but they're willing to pay for phone and utility and water. How would you recommend educating the public, not the transportation professionals in this room, but the public about the value and the need and the potential need to pay for their infrastructure?
Well, I hope we don't have to educate them through, I hope we don't end up educating them through more events such as the one we saw in Minneapolis last year. It's unfortunate that most of what I spend my time doing is trying to figure out how to keep the existing system going. And I can talk all I want to about the need to clean culverts, repair bridges, pave potholes, and it's not going to excite very many people. It doesn't photograph well. Sorry, guys. So I think one of the things that the stimulus package gives us the opportunity to do is not only show that transportation investment is good for the economy in direct expenditures, but also get over some of the bad impression we made with things such as the Bridge to Nowhere. It is an unfortunate fact that two most categories that grew the most in SAFETEA-LU were earmarks, including that bridge, and the so-called equity bonus system, which is basically the donor-donee adjustment to the benefit of states that sell more gasoline. Because the stimulus package has neither of those, this may be an opportunity for us to shift the discussion back to sort of transportation as people used to be willing to pay for it. Transportation that simply did good work in their communities, did it quickly, and showed benefits.
Okay, well, we should take one more question? All right, well, this will be the last question, okay, because we've got to move on to the next stage in lunch.
My name is John Falcocchio, Polytechnic Institute of NYU. My question is for Michael Replogle. The picture you showed for State Route 91 in California showed a lane that was practically empty. It was moving pretty fast. People were willing to pay for it. And a whole bunch of other traffic was stuck there. So they had, obviously, a choice to either pay and move faster or not pay and be queued for their own experience. So what do you think that indicates with regard to acceptance of congestion pricing as a whole program for implementing a more productive system? There's a difference between, in my mind, applies to everybody who travels, and the one you showed, which is basically a method to provide superior service for people who wanted to pay more and receive it.
Well, I mean, clearly there are significant barriers to widespread public support for comprehensive network pricing. We're not there. And it's a foreign concept to many people, the idea that you could pay. I think in many respects this is like we are at the point right now, much as we were in about 1960 with telecommunications, where there was one big telephone company and you might have a choice between the black square phone or the Princess phone. Enough of you probably are old enough to remember Princess phones. And now people pay a lot more for telephone service. We pay through many more channels. We have a richer array of choices. And, we're all carrying around, phones in our pockets now, which enable us to call pretty much anywhere in the world. And so it's a question of giving people the opportunity to have choice. And right now people don't have choice. And, back then we paid a lot in 1960 for long-distance service, and local calls were very cheap. They were bundled flat price. So it's just a change in the paradigm. It's a bit like electricity as well, where if we managed our electricity networks the same way that we manage our road networks today, we'd experience brownouts or system failures once or twice a day. And most of us wouldn't find that to be acceptable. Our lives are built around dependability of electricity. And our lives used to be built around dependability of transportation, but that's becoming an increasing problem. We're adapting to it like frogs in gradually boiling water. But I think what we need is some more effective demonstration projects like we had started in Seattle and Portland, showing what system-wide pricing can do, where people voluntarily reduce their motor vehicle use to save money. Pay-as-you-drive car insurance is another way of introducing the public to this idea. So I think it will come. It's a matter of a paradigm shift in how people think and expectations.
Thank you for being a wonderful audience, and thank you, panel.